Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, who has become very close friends with Donald Trump, stated that she plans to review the country's three main government policy principles. Since 1967, according to which Japan cannot possess nuclear weapons, nor produce or deploy nuclear weapons on its territory. Takaichi is planning to lift these restrictions. Earlier, she also stated that, in general, Japan should reconsider its pacifist attitudes in its legislation, and acknowledge the reality in which China is increasingly threatening the region, and Japan will have to arm itself seriously. Moreover, Japan, spoiler alert, is planning to purchase Tomahawk missiles from the Americans. But notably, Takaichi proposes to lift the ban on importing nuclear weapons into the country, since it weakens the deterrent potential of the United States of America. Currently, Washington cannot deploy nuclear warheads at its military bases in Japan or on ships that enter its ports. Well, that's why the new Prime Minister of the country wants to remove this legal obstacle. But that's not all. Overall, Beijing is very nervous about Takaichi's behavior right now. That's why I suggest we take a closer look at how Japan is clearly militarizing right now and is even ready to acquire nuclear weapons. Japan is completely changing its approach to defense and security issues. Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi of Japan plans to review the three principles of state policy from 1967, according to which Japan does not have the right to possess nuclear weapons, nor to produce or deploy them on its territory. It doesn't matter how. First, the issue will be discussed within the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, led by Takaichi, and with coalition partners. Consultations will begin, by the way, as early as next week. If the coalition parties manage to develop a unified position, it will be formalized as a recommendation to the government, after which the final decision will be made. Who would have thought, by Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi? Everything centers on her. Her party, her government, she's the Prime Minister. And it's telling that as recently as November 11, during a speech in Parliament, Takaichi avoided answering. The question was whether Japan would stick to the three non-nuclear principles. At that time, she noted that now is not the time to make any statements on this matter, and also said that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could become a situation threatening Japan's survival and would allow the country to exercise its right to collective self-defense. The focus is on collective self-defense. This triggered a strong reaction from Beijing, who sensed a threat and began to realize something was happening. Earlier, Takaichi said that if Japan's security depends on the United States of America, then the authorities should, quote, thoroughly discuss the current nuclear restriction. Moreover, even the Kremlin got scared today. Vladimir Putin expressed concern that Japan is showing uncertainty about its non-nuclear status after the election of the new prime minister on October 21. And the press secretary of the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, says that Moscow is closely monitoring Takaichi's statements regarding nuclear status. But Japan is still moving toward this step, and all this is thanks, on one hand, to closer ties with the United States, and on the other hand, to the reckless actions of Russia itself. Because Japan, in principle, was a fairly pacifist country for a long time. We'll get to that later. Everything changed dramatically. Can you guess the year? In 2022, when the bold dictator Putin gave the order to the unwashed Russians, well, to invade Ukraine. But we'll get to that. Here, I suggest recalling a recent episode that already showed back then that the new Prime Minister of Japan is definitely shifting Japan onto a military track. Donald Trump arrived in Tokyo on October 28. Alongside Takaichi, they signed a trade agreement stating Japan grants the United States full access to its rare earth metals. The agreement on the supply of strategic minerals and rare earth elements is intended to reduce dependence on China, which controls the materials at the core of modern technology, from smartphones to fighter jets, missiles, and so on. The document stipulates that within the next 6 months, Japan and the United States will jointly identify priority projects in areas such as the production of magnets, batteries, catalysts, and optical materials. They will also create strategic reserves of key minerals and implement other measures to strengthen supplies. Japan has also pledged to invest $550 billion in the United States economy and boost purchases of American goods, including Japan has committed to increasing defense spending in light of the growing threat from China. Takaichi promised to accelerate plans to increase the military budget to 2% of gross domestic product. And on October 28 in Tokyo, Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi and United States President Donald Trump demonstrated their unity in a speech before the military personnel. Personnel of the Japan Self-Defense Forces and the United States Armed Forces in Japan aboard the nuclear aircraft carrier George Washington. And here I will quote Trump first. Quote, "The blessed alliance between the United States and Japan is one of the most remarkable examples of relations in the world. It is the foundation of peace and security in the Pacific." To which Takaichi responds, quote, "With President Trump, I will take the Japan-United States alliance to a higher level. The world will be protected. With firm determination and action, I intend to significantly strengthen Japan's defense capabilities in light of the increasingly complex security situation in East Asia." Overall, everything indicated that Takaichi would seriously promote the idea of allowing the United States to deploy American nuclear weapons on Japanese territory. Who would have thought, by the way, that this was something that was very hard to even imagine, even in some fantasies? Before the start of the full-scale aggression, Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and the clear alliance between Moscow and Beijing in this war. If you doubt that it was specifically Russia's war against Ukraine that influenced such aggressive militarization of Japan, here's an undeniable fact for you. Let me remind you, the last time Japan's national security strategy was updated was on December 16th, 2022, which is the same year that Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And everyone in the world understood that Russians are bloodthirsty savages. So, in the updated, I emphasize the 2022 National Security Strategy of Japan. It states the country's right to carry out counter-strikes against targets on the territory of a potential adversary. Before that, their legislation stated that they couldn't even respond with strikes. They were such pacifists. To achieve this, Japan's self-defense forces plan to increase the range of their existing Type 12 missiles, develop their own hypersonic weapons, and purchase American Tomahawk cruise missiles. The document also calls for increasing military spending to 2% of gross domestic product by 2027, but Takaichi promised this goal would be achieved early. Now, Japan is also moving toward acquiring nuclear weapons. I stress, all this is occurring after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In August, Rui Matsukawa, a Japanese parliament member and part of the National Security Policy Council and ruling Liberal Democratic Party, said Japan might consider acquiring nuclear weapons. And after Japan experienced atomic bombing at the end of World War II, you understand, this issue was taboo. In Japan, this topic wasn't even discussed at all. But now Japan finds itself surrounded by 3 nuclear powers: Russia, China, and North Korea. Conclusions need to be made right now, especially seeing that Russia is truly a barbaric country, a savage people who see nothing in front of them except war. Well, if 2 elderly dictators, Putin and Xi Jinping, were striving for demilitarization, then, as you can understand, they got the exact opposite effect. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye. Subtitles by Dima Torzok.